One day he would stand before Pharaoh without a weapon and make an empire tremble. And the mother walked home, carrying emptiness in her heart and a hope she could not explain with words. Morning over the Nile was calm. The water flowed slowly, as if unaware that it had become an instrument of fear. The reeds whispered in the wind, birds rose from the banks, and everything looked as though life was continuing as usual. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river with her attendants. For her, the Nile was not a place of death, but part of daily luxury, coolness, silence, a refuge from the palace. She stopped. "What is that?" she said, peering into the reeds. Something was swaying between the stalks. Small, not like a branch. She nodded to a servant. "Bring it." The servant stepped into the water, parted the reeds, and lifted the basket. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the bank and opened it. In that moment, the silence shattered. The child cried. The cry was thin, defenseless, impossible to confuse with anything else. Pharaoh's daughter leaned closer and understood everything before anyone spoke. "This is one of the Hebrew children," she said quietly. She knew her father's decree. She knew this basket was a violation of the order. She knew one gesture would be enough for it all to end. She looked at the child, and something inside her stopped. She did not see a threat to the empire. She saw life. The crying faded, as if the child sensed it had been heard. Pharaoh's daughter held her breath. This was a moment of choice, not between law and mercy, but between heart and fear. She could have turned away. She could have said, "Do as you were commanded," and the world would have gone on. But she reached out her hands. "I will take him," she said. At that moment, a girl stepped out from the reeds. She moved carefully, as if afraid to startle destiny itself. "My lady," Miriam said, bowing her head, "shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to care for the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter looked at her, closely, intently. She saw fear in those eyes, and courage. "Go," she said. Miriam ran as fast as she could, not looking back. Her heart pounded in her throat. She knew whom she would bring. When the mother arrived, she did not lift her eyes. She was afraid to look, afraid to hear the verdict. But she heard something else. "Take this child," Pharaoh's daughter said, "and nurse him for me. I will pay you." The mother took her son into her arms, openly now, not hiding, not fleeing. On the bank of the Nile, where children were meant to die, a woman from a slave people nursed her son, under the protection of Pharaoh's house. And no one present yet understood that in this moment, the emperor's command cracked, and history turned in another direction. For God does not always break systems with thunder. Sometimes he allows them to break against one merciful heart. When the boy had grown, he was brought to the palace. Stone gates opened before him as easily as the waters of the Nile once had. Inside it was bright, spacious, and cold, not from temperature, but from power. Here no one cried. Here they commanded. Pharaoh's daughter took the child in her arms before the entire court. "He will be my son," she said. No one objected. She named him Moses, "because I drew you out of the water." He did not yet understand the words, but the name was already a seal upon his life. He grew up in the palace, as those grow who are allowed everything. He was taught to read hieroglyphs, to count, to govern, to listen, and to speak so that others would be silent. He was shown maps, temples, the gods of Egypt. He was told, "You are special. You are not like the slaves. You belong to this house." And he learned, quickly, deeply, but something in him did not fit. He remembered the smell of a simple home. He remembered the hands of a woman who fed him not as a servant, but as a mother. He remembered the quiet voice of a sister who sometimes appeared and looked at him as if she were afraid of losing him. He lived between two worlds. By day, marble and gold. By night, questions without answers. He saw the slaves when he went beyond the palace walls. He saw bent backs. He heard the shouts of overseers, and each time he felt a strange pressure in his chest. Not fear, not anger, but something deeper. He knew, I am not like them, but also, I am not like these. Pharaoh's daughter protected him. She gave him a name, a status, a future. But she could not give him the answer to the one question that mattered most. Who am I really? The name Moses echoed through the palace every day. Drawn out of the water, he did not yet know that one day he would stand before the sea and the water would part again. Not for him alone, but for an entire people. The palace tried to make him Egyptian. His blood remembered something else. And between these two truths, a man was growing who one day would no longer be able to remain silent. That day, Moses did not plan to change anything. He simply went out beyond the palace walls, into a world that was real, unadorned by gold and silence. He went to his own people. He had seen the slaves before. But this time he looked differently, not as an observer, but as a man in whom something had ripened. He saw the hard labor, the bent backs, the faces without hope. He saw what the palace chose not to see. And suddenly he saw a scene that took his breath away. An Egyptian was beating a Hebrew, not disciplining, not correcting, beating, blow after blow, without cause, without restraint. Moses felt a wave rise within him, not fear, not calculation, but pure, uncontrolled rage. Everything he had carried for years, memory, shame, silence, division, exploded in a single moment. He looked around, no one, and then he stepped forward. The blow was swift. The Egyptian's body fell into the sand. Silence covered everything. Moses stared at his hands. They were the hands of a prince, but they were stained with blood. He buried the body in the sand as if he could bury the act itself, its consequences, even himself. He thought he had done what everyone was waiting for. He thought this was the beginning of deliverance. But the next day broke him. He went out again to the people and saw two Hebrews fighting. He stepped between them, almost pleading, "Why do you strike your brother?" And he heard words he would never forget. "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" Those words were more bitter than any sentence. Moses understood. His deed was known. He was not expected. He was not accepted. He wanted to be a deliverer, but became a murderer in the eyes of both enemies and his own people. That same day the news reached the palace. Pharaoh heard and did not hesitate. "He is dangerous," he said. "He must be destroyed." Moses did not learn of the order from official words. He felt it in his skin. The palace that had once been home became a trap, and he fled. Without entourage, without status, without a name that meant anything. He fled into the desert, leaving Egypt behind, not just a country, but a life that would never return. And there, in the sand, between fear and silence, began the path that would turn a fiery prince into a humble shepherd, and in time, a messenger of God. Moses fled for a long time. He did not know how many days passed. The sun rose and set, and before his eyes there was only earth, stone, and sky. With every step, the palace grew farther away, not only behind him, but inside him. Once his name had been spoken with respect. Once people bowed before him. Once he believed he would change the world. Now he walked as no one. When he reached Midian, there was no anger left in him, only exhaustion. He sat by a well like a man with nowhere else to go. And there he understood for the first time, his flight was not defeat, but a pause. One he did not choose, but one he needed. There he defended the daughters of a priest, not for glory, but simply because he could not watch injustice. It was the one thing in him that had not changed. He stayed in that land. He married. He received a home. But every morning he woke not as a prince, but as a shepherd. Hands that could have held a scepter now held a staff. Eyes that had seen a throne now counted sheep. Days became the same. Silence grew louder than any shout. Years passed. 10, 20, 30, 40 years. In that time, much in him changed. Haste, self-confidence, the belief that he knew better. And something else was born. Patience, attention, the ability to wait. When a son was born to him, Moses named him Gershom and spoke aloud what he had carried in his heart for years. For I am a foreigner in a foreign land. He no longer belonged to Egypt, but he did not yet know that he belonged to God. He thought God had forgotten him, that his story had ended in the sand along with that Egyptian. But it was in this silence, without miracles or voices, that God slowly stripped away everything unnecessary, so that one day Moses could endure an encounter with a fire that does not consume. That day everything was as usual. The sun rose slowly, the flocks moved along familiar paths, and the desert was silent. Moses walked ahead, with a staff in his hand, years in his eyes, and thoughts that no longer led anywhere. He expected nothing, and that is why he saw what he was not looking for. A bush. It burned. The flame was real, bright, living, dangerous. But the branches did not blacken, the leaves did not curl, and the fire did not consume. Moses stopped. I will go over and see, he said to himself, why the bush does not burn up. He took a step, and another. Moses! Moses! The voice was not loud, but it made the ground seem weightless. Moses froze. Here I am. Do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. He slowly removed his sandals. The stone beneath his feet was warm. The air was thick. And in that moment he understood. He had not come to the fire. The fire had been waiting for him. I am the God of your father, the voice said, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look. Then God spoke as if opening his heart. I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry. I know their pain. Each word struck exactly what Moses had tried to bury for 40 years. And I have come down to deliver them. Now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh. Moses lifted his head. His heart tightened. Who am I, he whispered, that I should go to Pharaoh? The voice replied calmly, I will be with you. But fear did not leave. And if they ask, what is your name? Then God spoke words never spoken to a human before. I am who I am. Say this, I am has sent me to you. A name without beginning, a name without end, a God not dependent on empires. Moses drew a breath. And if they do not believe me, God gave signs. The staff became a snake and a staff again. The hand turned leprous and was healed. Water would become blood. Still Moses hesitated. Lord, I am not eloquent. I am slow of speech. The fire did not fade. The voice did not rise. Who gave man a mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf? I will be with your mouth. Then Moses said what hurt the most. Please, send someone else. Silence fell. Not empty, heavy. The anger of the Lord burned, but did not destroy. Is there not Aaron, your brother? He will speak for you. Moses was silent. He did not receive answers to every fear. He did not become brave, but he received what mattered most. God was going with him. And when he walked away from the bush, the desert was no longer just a desert. It had become the place where a man met the living God and could never remain the same. Moses returned to the place he had fled from. Now he had no palace, no army, only the word of God and a staff in his hand. He gathered the elders. He showed the signs, and the people believed. They bowed down and they worshiped. Then Moses approached the doors that had once been his home. He entered Pharaoh's presence and said, "Thus says the Lord, let my people go." Pharaoh smiled. "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?"